You don't have the power to bend reality without it snapping back at you.
You organize your brain when you sleep, at least to the degree that you can organize it. And you can often be more solid or more doubtful about a decision if you sleep on it. For knowledge to be yours, you have to integrate it with your own experience.
Need motivation?
Watch your top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men all my life. Like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jordan Peterson, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Avoid falsehood.
You're going to use what you think to guide your action, and the consequence of that is going to be how your life turns out. So I'm dead serious about what I write because I know what the pathway is. It's like you don't communicate in a false manner, because if you do, you will warp the structure that guides your actions, and you will absolutely 100% suffer for that. I mean, one of the things I've learned as a clinical psychologist is that I've never seen anyone, it's really a terrifying thing, I've never seen anyone get away with anything, ever. The chickens always come home to roost. So, and sometimes it might, let's say you get away with something, it's like, yeah, you think so, man. You wait 5 years from now, 7 years from now, it'll come back.
Is that karma?
It's more like, yes, I think it's the same idea, but it's more like you don't have the power to manipulate reality. Like, you have the power to bring about reality in some sense, because you confront potential, and through your actions and your communicative intent, you turn potential into reality. But you don't have the power to bend reality without it snapping back at you.
You don't think so? So you don't think visionaries and influencers have the ability to bend reality?
No, I don't think they bend it. I think that they I mean, you can bring new things into being, but you can't get away with a falsehood. No, you can definitely bring new things into being.
You can't get away with a falsehood.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, makes sense.
And you can't get away with weak thinking either, because, I mean, any more than you can get away with improper action. It just doesn't work. So you're contending, it's why, I mean, one of the themes in my writing is the danger of falsehood. And at every level, it's like, well, if you tell the truth to the degree that you can, or at least don't lie, I think that's rule 8, then you have reality on your side. You got to decide, man, you want reality on your side, or do you want reality against you? Now, I wouldn't recommend the whole reality against you thing, because you're not going to win. You're going to get flattened. And so I'm very careful with what I say, and I'm very careful with what I write.
Rule number 2, heightened consciousness.
We are thrown challenges, and that in some sense those are best construed as tests of our ethical ability. So what Jung thought, his idea was something like this, that at the beginning of time, people were unconscious, and that consciousness emerged with all of its catastrophes, consciousness of death, for example. And one way out of the burden of consciousness was to return to unconsciousness. You can do that with alcohol. You can do that by being dependent. You can do that by failing to grow up. You refuse the burden of consciousness by becoming unconscious again. But there's another way forward, which is to become even more conscious. So the idea would be a little bit of consciousness is like an illness. But if you can expand that consciousness upwards enough, then it starts to become something that is its own cure. And that partly what your goal is while you suffer through life is to heighten your consciousness to the point where everything gets integrated enough so that that's proper medication for the disease of self-consciousness.
Rule number 3, be articulate.
It's one thing to live properly, and that's not a trivial thing, but it's another thing to be able to articulate yourself and to be able to negotiate. And generally speaking, there's nothing about that isn't advantageous. And even introverted and anxious people can learn to do that. Those are learnable skills. It's not easy, but
but you can manage it. You can also speak carefully, and listen to what you're saying and only try to say things that you think are true. That's also unbelievably useful. You have to feel that out. Like, is this really what I believe? Or am I putting it forward, well, because I want to look good, or I want to dominate, or I want to express obliquely an emotion that I'm too cowardly to come out and confront directly, or am I being manipulative? There's lots of reasons that people use language. But what you really should use it for is to state what you believe to be true, and then to let the consequences of that unfold. And so that can also help you. Simple truths, bluntly stated, can be very powerful. You don't need a lot of verbal fluency under those circumstances if there's evidence of strength of character behind it.
Rule number 4, take your place in the world.
Look, it's good for you to go take your place in the world. Have some ambition. Have a vision. Have a goal. Have a strategy. Try to be a good person. Not because it's your duty precisely, because that's the proper way to live. We're in danger of undermining all of that. And it's not good for people. One of the things that I've really learned, for example, recently is that learned to articulate better, is that there's a very tight relationship between aspiration and responsibility. So let's say, well, the first question might be, do you need to aspire to something? And the answer is, well, yes, because you have to do something. If you just sit there, you'll die. You can't just sit there. You have to go act out in the world. Okay, so act towards what? Well, that's whatever your aspiration is. You have to have an aim. Okay, well, what should the aim be? Well, it should be something worth doing, let's say. Why do something that you don't feel is worth doing? What do you think's worth doing? Well, if you watch other people and you judge when they're doing something worthwhile, you usually judge them positively if you see that they're taking responsibility, at least for themselves. What, do you want to be completely useless so other people have to take care of you? That's pretty pathetic. And maybe you could get your act together so you're taking care of yourself and your family. And maybe you could even do better than that and take care of yourself and your family and your community.
Also, if you want to have more confidence, self-love, self-belief, check out my 254 series. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a habit. So I've designed a special free program to help you get it, where I will send you an unlisted video to your email for the next 254 days to shift your self-belief forward. The link to sign up for free is in the description below.
If you're going to speak effectively, you have to know way more than you're talking about. You have to treat yourself like you matter. Because if you don't, then you don't take care of yourself and you become vengeful. Oh no, you're okay. You should feel good about yourself. Like, you're fine the way you are. It's like you think, well, that's a calming message for people. It's like, no, it's not.
Rule number 5, be guided by your principles.
There's lots of ways of defying the crowd, let's say. I mean, you could live your life the way that you want to live it. That's a matter of action. And they say actions speak louder than words. And one of the best things you could possibly be is an inspirational example. So that's not nothing. That's something. Live properly in your defiance of the crowd, right? Make your own course. Allow yourself to be guided by your own genuine principles. You don't necessarily have to advertise that, which is in some sense what you're doing when you're debating, because you're taking the manner in which you act, like if you're an integrated person and you're articulating that. But maybe you can't do that because you don't have the verbal skills. Well, then the question would be, maybe you should develop some more verbal skills. I don't know this for sure, Dave, but generally it's useful. How do you do that? Doesn't hurt to read. Really doesn't hurt to write. A little bit of writing every day clarifies your thinking.
Rule number 6, have a value hierarchy.
You need a value hierarchy. It's inevitable that you have a value hierarchy and that you look at the world through it, and that it should be well structured, and that there should be something of divine importance at the top. I would say what should occupy the top position is the realization, for example, that each person is of divine value, and that the most appropriate way of interacting with potential is by embodying and speaking the truth. That's not a bad way of briefly conceptualizing what might be at the highest pinnacle of the value structure. I would say that's what the logos is. And so The soul is what manifests itself in the choice between different pathways, in the choice between different ways of transforming the potential of the future into the actuality of the present. And it does that by making ethical decisions, by choosing between good and evil at each choice point. And to the degree that it chooses good, then it takes the raw potential of the future and it transforms it into the being of the present that is good. And to the degree that it does that in a manner that's evil and contaminated by malevolence and hatred and vengefulness, then it takes a pathway that corrupts the world and makes things worse. And it's the soul that's doing that, and it's the soul that's responsible for that. And it's also that active part of the soul that's shaping the deeper soul in some sense, which would be something like the cumulative consequence of all those choices, something akin to what people more classically have referred to as character.
Rule number 7, aspire and be responsible.
Your life doesn't have meaning without aspiration or an aim. Okay, so you need a hierarchy of values. There's got to be something at the top. It's got to be something important. If you don't have that, your life doesn't have any meaning. So if you criticize the hierarchy, or even the idea of hierarchy, you destroy the idea of aspiration. And then people have nothing. Well, that's not helpful. People are built for a struggle and they're built for a weight. And you want to take on a heavy burden voluntarily. See if you can put yourself together. See what you can do out in the world while you're waiting to die. It's an all-in game. It better be worthwhile. And so there's a tight relationship between responsibility and aspiration and hierarchy. And when you criticize those things, you get rid of the aspiration.
Rule number 8, take time to make decisions.
You have to negotiate until you come to the best solution that can be negotiated, which isn't necessarily a perfect solution, but it might be the best one that can be done. And then you have to stick with it until the next negotiation. And if you get upset during the negotiations, which you likely will, because these are difficult topics, how to divide up responsibilities in the house, and people get mad because they feel they've been taken advantage of or aren't being listened to. One of the rules was, well, you can leave the discussion, but only until you calm down, and then you have to come back because these things have to be pushed through. They have to be negotiated through because the alternative is, well, important things don't get done, or people do them resentfully because they're sort of forced by their own orderliness or their own conscientiousness or by force, psychological or otherwise, on the part of other people. These things have to be negotiated through. You can tell if you've got the balance between making peace and speaking the truth right if the conversation continues. And it can be emotional and will be and can be difficult because important things have to be dealt with. But as long as the people are still in the conversation and communicating, then you've got the balance right. And you might have to take a break. Maybe you have to hold off till the next day. Maybe sometimes when you're negotiating something that's difficult, you have to offer the other person the opportunity to sleep on their decision too, which I think is often a very good idea. If you have to make an important decision in your life, it's very useful to tell the person that you're negotiating with that, look, I'm interested in this and it seems good, but I'm not going to agree until I sleep on it. Gives you, lots of things happen when you sleep. You organize your brain when you sleep, at least to the degree that you can organize it. And you can often be more solid or more doubtful about a decision if you sleep on it.
Rule number 9, find meaning.
You need a meaning to sustain you through the vicissitudes of life. Okay, well, try to debate that. It's like, is life painful? Yes. Is it anxiety provoking? Yes. Is it uncertain? Yes. Is it painful beyond bearing sometimes? Yes. It's difficult. Everyone agrees about that. Now, they might disagree about how difficult, but that doesn't matter. That the central point holds. Okay, what if you think that's all pointless? Well, that doesn't seem very helpful. Okay, so you need a sustaining meaning. Well, where do you find that? Well, you generally find it in responsibility to yourself and to other people.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is desire peace.
Something that I learned, for example, from Jean Piaget, he called that an equilibrated state. And an equilibrated state is like a game that everyone wants to play. And so if you set your household up properly, then it's a game that everybody is participating in voluntarily. And that's going to be predicated on the desire for peace and the willingness to speak truth and the ability to take responsibility. So that has to be part of your higher order moral aim. And then when you're having a difficult discussion with someone, the discussion is going to be affected by that higher order moral aim. It's not going to be contaminated to the same degree by your desire to inflict pain and attain victory and, crush your opponent and punish them for their previous sins and indicate your disappointment in things they've done over the years and all of that.
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video, and what is your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of actually doing something and following through. That, Believe Nation, is not enough. 35% is not enough. We got to do something. But when you get inspired by watching a video like this, and then you create a plan of action, your chances of following through jump to 91%. And when you commit publicly, like putting your comment down below with your plan, it jumps to 95%. That's what I want for you. I want you to take action. Your dreams are too important. Your life matters. Your mission has to happen. So, question of the day, your biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week, put it down in the comments below, and I'm going to celebrate alongside with you.
For knowledge to be yours, you have to integrate it with your own experience. You have to see how that applies to your own case and then have a story to tell about how that's the case. That's personal, right? So it's the intermingling of the abstract with the personal that makes it real. It's the intermingling of the epic with the particular, or the archetypal with the concrete, that makes something real. And so if an idea is still an abstraction, if you're just parroting it, it also means that you haven't learned to use it as a tool. You haven't started to apply it in your own life. Because you could say, well, here's an idea that I came across, and here's how I implemented it, and here's what I learned when I implemented it. And then that's definitely yours, right? Because you can kind of tell because you're recounting your knowledge in a manner that no one else could do. And that's what gives it that ring of genuineness, right? That's what it means in some sense to speak from the heart. It's like, well, here's my experience with this idea. And you can say too, well, here's how I understand this idea. And you reformulate that in your own terms. And that means that you associate it with the unique particularities of your own experience. And then I would also say it means that you've acted out the ideas and tested them, like in the world, and that you have your own stories to tell about that. And that's how you make it your own.
If you want 10 more amazing rules from Jordan Peterson, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
You want to present yourself to the world in a manner that doesn't disgrace you in some sense. That might be a good way to think about it. And you don't want to disgrace yourself, because the consequence of disgrace is